Just we are not an authorized person for prescribing medications, but in palliative care, nurses are leading the home care programs. With the help of the doctor, the nurses are able to modify the drugs and prescribe the drugs. So today is one of the important session. It's NSAID and adjuvants. This session will be taken by Dr. Mary Abdullah. So he's a palliative care physician. Basically, she is an anesthesiologist. Since 2016 onwards, she is working as a palliative care physician in Delhi. Madam, welcome. Over to you.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm actually a pain and palliative care physician. I treat a lot of pain patients also, chronic pain patients. And it's very, as usual, it's a pleasure for me to take this session for as part of the TIPS ECO program. And I'm very privileged to be associated with Pallium and take these classes because pain is very close to me, and I'm really happy to take this session. Okay, can we start off with my presentation? Okay. So I'll be talking about pain management. I'll be focusing on the WHO step 1, step 2 drugs, and also on some of the adjuvant drugs that we are giving at every step of the ladder. And then, because neuropathic pain is a very important component of pain in cancer, I will be talking about neuropathic pain and about the various drugs that we use to treat neuropathic. Am I audible?
Yes, doctor, you are.
Okay. Now, one landmark document had been passed about 10 years ago, which was a Declaration Montreal. This was at the International Pain Summit of the Indian Association for the Study of Pain Conference, in which it was declared that access to pain management is a fundamental human right. So like we have fundamental rights, like right to speech, right to religion, right to vote, pain management has also been made a fundamental human right, which means it is a right of all people to have access to adequate assessment and treatment of pain by trained healthcare professionals. Next, please. So, according to the international human rights law, countries have to provide pain treatment as part of their obligation under the right to health. So, it is an obligation of every healthcare provider to provide pain management. And also, it goes on to say that failure to take reasonable steps to ensure that people who suffer pain have access to pain treatment can result, that is, if you don't deliver the pain treatment, result in violation of this obligation. And it is actually deemed cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment. So when a patient is suffering with pain, it is actually a degrading situation, and it is deemed cruel also. So cancer pain is now a health priority, and the World Health Organization has developed policies and strategies to treat it with an emphasis on pain management, because a lot of patients with cancer, about nearly 80 to 90% of patients with cancer can have pain. So cancer pain management is very important as part of palliative care treatment. Next, please. So now let's discuss a WHO analgesic ladder. This ladder was devised about nearly 30 years ago, or more than 30 years ago. I think it is, more than 30 years ago, by a group of international experts. And they devised this step ladder approach to treat cancer pain. And after that, from the time it was first devised, over the years, it has been translated into 22 languages, and it has served as a catalyst for treating cancer pain world over. Next, please. Now, it is a very simple, well-validated, and an effective tool to treat pain, particularly cancer pain. And it is based on the severity of pain. So before we treat it, we have to know how severe the pain is, how intense the pain is, and based on that, you can apply the ladder. Now, prior to this ladder, that is prior to 1984, 86, what happened was there were a lot of people who were dying with unnecessary pain. Why was that so? That was firstly because there was a lot of drug regulation with regard to opioids, administering opioids. And because of these regulations, it was not easy to procure opioids and not easy to give them also, prescribe them to patients. And also, taking opioids was a stigma. People felt that they are on drugs and they are addicts. So that stigma was also attached to opioids. So because of all this, the regulation and the stigma, people were not getting the adequate pain management, because we know that in severe pain, we have to give opioids. Now, when the WHO introduced this ladder, it actually legitimized the use of opioids. The World Health Organization says, go ahead and give opioids for treatment of pain, severe pain. So because of that, the drug regulations also were made lighter and more easily accessible. And also the stigma was removed. So it was no longer considered a stigma to take opioids. Okay, that's because the WHO validated this drug as part of the WHO analgesic ladder. Next, please. So, but before we apply the ladder, I told you it is based on the severity of pain. So we have to know how severe the pain is. So we need to assess pain. Only when you assess pain, we'll know the severity of pain. Because we know that there are various tools to assess pain, which might have been discussed with you: the visual analog scale, the numerical rating scale. Based on that, we can say the pain is 4 or 5 or 10 out of 10. Okay, so we need to assess the severity of pain. Then we have to also know whether the pain is nociceptive or neuropathic. That also could have been discussed among the types of pain in your earlier class. Nociceptive pain is basically pain due to tissue damage. It is mainly an inflammatory kind of a pain. Okay, so it is a sharp pain which is very well defined, and it could be visceral or it could be somatic depending upon where it is situated. Or it could be a neuropathic pain. Neuropathic pain is because of nerve damage and nerve injury. That pain is different from nociceptive pain. That I will discuss later. It is a dysesthetic pain. You can have a burning or current-like sensation. It's because of the nerve damage. So we have to know whether it's a nociceptive or neuropathic pain. According to that, we can give the drug. And so is the pain mild, moderate, or severe? That is the intensity of pain based on the visual analog scale or the numerical rating score. Okay. So assessment of pain is very important when you're applying the WHO analgesic ladder. Next, please. So let's come to the analgesic ladder. It's basically a 3-step ladder. Now, using this 3 steps, the first step in which the pain is treated is mild pain, and it is treated with a non-opioid analgesic with an adjuvant. You notice that the adjuvant is added at every step of the ladder, whether step 1, step 2, or step 3. Now, if the pain is not responding to this non-opioid analgesic with adjuvant, then you go on to the next step, which is a step 2, in which you add a weak opioid along with a non-opioid and an adjuvant. So again, you give the step 1 drugs also along with the step 2 drug. If it is not responding to this also, that is, the pain is very severe, then you have to add a strong opioid. The most commonly used strong opioid is morphine. And this you can add along with a non-opioid like a paracetamol or a non-NSAIDs or an adjuvant. So based on this, you go up the ladder. Okay, now using this ladder, 71 to 76% of cancer pain can get satisfactory relief. So just a simple ladder using oral drugs, you can relieve more than 3/4 patients with cancer pain. Okay, next please. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
And can everyone understand me? Or should I go slow, or am I going fast? Is it okay?
You can
Participants?
answer. Yeah, you can answer it in our chat or.
Yeah, if you have a problem, please put it up in the chat. if you can not understand me or anything, or I have to go slow or something like that, let me know. Okay. Now let's come to the salient features of the WHO ladder. Now, the first and important feature of the ladder is all the drugs are given by mouth. It's given orally. So the oral route is a standard route, and this is true even when you're giving the strong opioids like morphine. And so why is it advantageous? Because by this, even the caregiver at home can administer the drugs based on the instructions. The nurses who are visiting the team in the home care visits can administer the medicine. So they don't have to be hospitalized, or they don't require any extra medical facility to get the drug. The second important feature, it is given by the ladder. That means you start with step 1, not effective, go to step 2 or step 3. So based on the severity of pain, you go up the ladder. Okay. And then another important thing of the WHO ladder is it's given by the clock. By the clock means it's given according to the duration of action of that particular drug. For example, you're giving morphine. You have to give it every 4 hours. You don't wait for 6 hours or 8 hours to give the next tablet, because the duration of action itself is only 4 hours. Beyond that, the pain will come back. Okay. Or if you take paracetamol, it has to be given every 6 hours. So you don't wait for the pain to come back to give paracetamol. So you're going by the clock, which means you have to give detailed instructions to the patient that this drug has to be given at 4 o'clock, 8 o'clock, or 12 o'clock. Or the other drug, 6-hourly drug, has to be given at 6 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock. So you have to be very clear that they have to look at the clock and give the drug. Why is that? So that the breakthrough pain doesn't happen. Because if you wait for the drug's duration of action to finish, the pain will start again. It's more difficult to control the pain than when you have it continuously suppressed throughout the 24 hours. Okay. Another important feature of the WHO ladder is it is individualized to the patient. That means the right dose for a particular patient is the one in which that patient has got pain relief. That could be maybe if you're giving morphine, it could be maybe 24 milligram morphine in one patient. It could be as much as 120 milligram of morphine in another patient. But for that patient who's getting 120, that is a dose that is relieving the pain. Whereas another patient may be getting relief with much smaller doses. So it is individualized to the patient. You have to see the right dose is the one in which the pain is relieved. Okay. And that means you have to take care of even the breakthrough pain. Because in between, if they have pain, then you have to give instructions that you have to give another dose in between. Okay. So depending on that you will come to know as they talk about morphine and things like that. But it is very much individualized to the patient. So you're tailoring the drug according to the requirement of the patient. Okay. And then at every step, you use an adjuvant drug. Adjuvant drugs can be drugs to treat the neuropathic pain. It could be a sedative. It could be a muscle relaxant, or it could be a corticosteroid. So all these are adding to the effect of the WHO drug, so that the overall dose of morphine and all can be reduced. Okay. So it has an opioid sparing effect. Plus, these adjuvant drugs are necessary to treat the other types of pain, which are non-nociceptive pain. And then you have to pay attention to detail. Attention to detail means that you have to take into account the patient's age, body weight, whether they have any comorbidities, or whether they have or any other drugs. So all that has to be taken into consideration when you're prescribing the medicines. So you have to pay a lot of attention to detail. What are the side effects? Are they getting any side effects? Then you have to treat it, or you have to taper off the drug. This is all called attention to detail. Next, please. So what are the advantages of the WHO ladder? Like I said, it is a very simple way of prescribing medicines, very easily understood, not only by the doctor, but by the nurses and by the caregivers. It's a validated tool. Validated tool means that it has been found to be effective. By using this particular format, you can actually relieve the pain. So it's not only effective, but it's also cost effective, because most of these drugs are relatively inexpensive drugs. And they can be implemented across the world, even in the remote areas of the world and underdeveloped countries. Very well suited for home care, because all these drugs are given orally. And it is not only given in cancer pain, but you can also give it in acute pain like post-operative pain, or pain due to a fracture, or you can even give it in non-cancer pain, chronic pain. Next, please. Now, like I said, this is a WHO ladder, and non-opioid drugs and adjuvants, like I said, are given at every step of the ladder. Okay, so mild to moderate pain can respond to step 1 to 2 drugs, but when the pain is very severe, you may have to go to step 3. So step 3 is not necessary to be given in all kinds of cancer pain, because a lot of cancer pain can be treated even without giving opioids. Next, please. There are some modifications of the WHO ladder, like you don't have to go to step 2. If the pain is very severe and it's not getting controlled with step 1, then you can directly move over to step 3. And sometimes even step 3 may not be effective, in which case you add a 4th step. And this is for treating crisis of chronic pain not responding to morphine. Next, please. So according to this, in the step 4, these are reserved for those 10 to 15% of patients who are not responding to even oral morphine. Okay. So what are the step 4 modalities? They include nerve blocks or epidural injections or a patient-controlled analgesia called a PCA pump. Sometimes you may have to give a neurolytic block like a celiac block or a hypogastric block, or sometimes you may even need to use intrathecal pumps to deliver morphine into the spinal, into the subarachnoid space, or you may have to even give a spinal cord stimulation. So they are advanced modalities which may have to be given in a certain percentage of patients who are not responding to step 3 drugs also. So that is a modification, and that was done in 2000. Okay. Next, please. Now let's discuss step 1 drugs. Now step 1 paracetamol, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, and they are combined with an adjuvant drug. So they are used to treat mild to moderate pain. Next, please. So let's discuss paracetamol. Now paracetamol, it's called acetaminophen in the US. It's the same. It is predominantly a central action. It inhibits the enzyme cyclooxygenase, or the COX-2, in the central nervous system. It has no effect on peripheral cyclooxygenase enzyme, so there are less side effects. It is predominantly antipyretic and analgesic. It does not have anti-inflammatory action. Okay, so if there is pain associated with inflammation, it may not be that effective. Next, please. So how do you give it? It is given in a dose of up to 3 grams a day. You don't exceed 4 grams. Okay, that's a maximum dose. And a single dose should not exceed 1 gram. Even in patients with liver damage, you can give it, but in a dose, much lesser dose of up to 2 to 3 grams a day. Pediatric use, very well tolerated in a dose of 50 milligram per kilogram every 6 hours. The total dose should not exceed 90 milligram per kilogram per day, or more than 4 grams a day. Don't exceed 4 grams a day for an average adult. Although it can be given rectally also, but when the oral route is feasible, it is preferable to give it orally. Next, please. So what are the advantages of paracetamol? It's got a very good safety profile. Like I will discuss NSAIDs, and you see how much undesirable side effects it has. Compared to that, paracetamol is very safe. It has no effect on the gastric mucosa, so well tolerated by peptic ulcer patients, no renal effects, no effects on platelets, so the coagulation is maintained. Even patients who are allergic and hypersensitive to aspirin, paracetamol can be given safely. Next, please. But there are some drawbacks. The important drawback is it has to be given every 6 hours. Okay, then it does have the potential for hepatotoxicity, but that is only when you give in doses more than 4 grams. And in those with liver function, where you can even go up to 2 to 3 grams in patients with liver dysfunction. If their patients are on chronic alcohol consumption, then you have to reduce the dose of paracetamol. And if the body weight is less than 50 kilograms, then the total dose should not exceed 2 grams or 500 mg 4 times a day. Next, please. So paracetamol is very important in cancer pain, and it is given at every step of the ladder. It has also got an opioid sparing effect. So when you give paracetamol, your total dose of opioids can be reduced. And it can be added at every step. It can be given at step 1, step 2, and step 3. So it's a very useful drug in the management of cancer. Next, please. Now we come to the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, or NSAIDs. Now, this is a very common over-the-counter drug. Very commonly, you can get it at the chemist. Okay, it has, in addition to analgesic properties, it has anti-inflammatory properties as well, which paracetamol doesn't have. So it is also a step 1 drug like paracetamol, but it is mainly given for nociceptive pain, that is pain due to tissue damage, not due to nerve damage. But occasionally it can be given for cancer-related neuropathic pain, because sometimes pain can cause inflammation also. Next, please. How does it act? This acts peripherally by inhibiting the peripheral cyclooxygenase enzyme. And this cyclooxygenase is a very important enzyme in the arachidonic acid cascade, which occurs after tissue injury, whereby in the end, prostaglandins are released. So prostaglandins are very important intermediaries in causation of pain, and particularly in pain due to tissue damage or nociceptive pain. I'll explain that to you in my next slide a little more. Next, please. Now, when tissue damage occurs, phospholipids are released. Now, phospholipids are converted to arachidonic acid, and this is converted to prostaglandins by this enzyme called COX-2 inhibitor. Okay. Now, besides this, this is the enzyme that is actually causing the pain to occur, pain and inflammation to occur. But there's another enzyme in the body called COX-1. That is actually a beneficial enzyme. It is a constitutive or a housekeeping enzyme, because this COX-1 leads to the good prostaglandins, not the one that causes pain, but the good prostaglandins that is present in the stomach, kidney, and platelet to preserve their function. That is why people are protected from stomach ulcers or kidney damage or platelet dysfunction. So this is a good prostaglandin and this is a bad one. The bad one is because of the COX-2 enzyme and the good one is because of the COX-1 enzyme. So having said that, I'll go on to my next slide. Now, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs are actually inhibiting both COX-1 and COX-2. They are the non-selective NSAIDs. So non-selective NSAIDs, like the commonly used Brufen or naproxen, they are inhibiting both COX-1 and COX-2. So by inhibiting COX-1, they actually can damage the stomach and the kidney, and they can cause platelet dysfunction. But by inhibiting the COX-2, it is preventing the pain. So the non-selective NSAIDs have got both adverse as well as beneficial effects. But there are selective COX-2 inhibitors which are interfering only with COX-2. Inflammation and the prostaglandins that are causing pain are inhibited, right? So they are the selective COX-2 inhibitors. So next, please. So if you look at the mode of action of non-selective COX-2, like ibuprofen, naproxen, aspirin, they are non-selective. So they're inhibiting both COX-1 and COX-2. I told you COX-1 is a beneficial enzyme. So by inhibiting that, you're causing damage to the stomach and the kidney and causing coagulation problems. But by inhibiting COX-2, it is actually relieving pain because the prostaglandins that are causing pain are inhibited, not inhibited actually. So these non-selective NSAIDs is a double-edged sword. It has got the adverse and the beneficial effects. Next, please. So what are these drugs, the non-selective NSAIDs? They are ibuprofen or brufen. It's given 400 mg every 6 hours, maximum of 1 or 2 grams a day. Naproxen is another commonly used non-selective drugs. You give in a dose of 250 to 500 mg, either orally or as a suppository. But so this is also a non-selective NSAID. Next, please. So what are the side effects of COX-1? I told you COX-1 inhibition causes side effects. They can be classified as cardiovascular, renal, gastrointestinal, hypersensitivity or allergic reactions, and even liver problems. Okay, so the prominent ones are the renal problems in which you can get renal dysfunction, and the gastrointestinal ones which cause peptic ulcer, bleeding, ulceration, etc. And of course, the allergic ones, like leading to skin allergies or bronchospasm. Next, please. So what are the risk factors for NSAIDs toxicity? For advanced age, the patients who are prone to GI toxicity are those who are older people, who are on long duration of NSAIDs, and who have a history of an upper GI bleed or a history of peptic ulcer. Those for renal function are those who are dehydrated, who are already on some nephrotoxic drugs, and whose creatinine clearance is also borderline or low. And of course, elderly people and those who are having diabetes. And then the patients who are at risk for stroke and MI, that is mainly because of the COX-2 drugs, are again those who have got associated comorbidities like hypertension, hyperlipidemia, advanced stage diabetes, etc. Next, please. So now let's discuss selective COX-2 inhibitors. Now, selective COX-2 inhibitors are not inhibiting COX-1. So the beneficial effect of COX-1 is retained. Only the adverse effect of COX-2 enzyme is inhibited. Okay. So what are these drugs? They are etoricoxib, which is commonly called leucoxia. It is given as a single dose, only one dose, 60 mg, 90 mg, 120 mg. Diclofenac sodium or Voveron, which can be given orally or IV, is also a selective COX-2 inhibitor. It's given in a dose of 50 mg every 8 hours, and the maximum dose is around 150 mg per day. Next, please. NSAIDs can also be given topically. Now, topical NSAIDs can produce the analgesic effect with less systemic absorption and less toxic effects. So, you have various creams and gels that are available that contain ibuprofen, diclofenac, piroxicam, or ketoprofen. So, they can also be widely used in the treatment of pain, mainly inflammatory. Next, please. But are selective COX-2 inhibitors really safe as compared to the non-selective ones? Because they are not inhibiting COX-1? Okay, let's see that. Next, please. Now, where the gastrointestinal system is concerned, that is peptic ulcer, gastritis is concerned, selective COX-2 inhibitors could be safer as compared to non-selective NSAIDs. But where renal damage is concerned, it is can cause as much renal damage as a non-selective COX-2 inhibitor. So, where renal damage can be caused even by COX-2 inhibitors. But in addition, it has another major disadvantage. It is prothrombotic. COX-2 inhibitors are prothrombotic. That means it can cause intravascular coagulation and lead to myocardial infarction and even stroke. Next, please. In fact, one of the drugs called rofecoxib was taken off the market because of these adverse effects in 2004. It's no longer available. But leucoxia is still available, but you have to use it in caution in certain types of patients. Next, please. In fact, there was a Danish study in 2010 in which they found there was increased cardiovascular morbidity and morbidity with COX-2 inhibitors. And the ones that were incriminated were rofecoxib and diclofenac sodium. So in such patients who have history of MI, CAD, or stroke, it is preferable to give Brufen and naproxen, which are non-selective COX inhibitors. Next, please. So what are the precautions? Whenever you give NSAIDs, you have to give it with a gastroprotective drug like pantoprazole. Be careful when you use it in patients with peptic disease, acid peptic disease, or those who are on steroids with CAD, hypertension, asthma, renal function, dysfunction, etc. Make sure the patient is adequately hydrated, otherwise the adverse effects are more. Also, when there's nephrotoxic drugs, be careful. And also, in patients with atherosclerotic heart disease or cerebrovascular disease, avoid COX-2 selective inhibitors. Next, please. I have now completed step 1. Is it clear and have I made myself understood? Yes? I'm asking the participants. Or is it difficult to understand? Yes? Okay. Good. So now I can proceed. Okay. Thank you. Now step 2, drugs. Step 2 is drugs are commonly used. Next, please. I told you they used to treat moderate pain not responding to step 1 drugs. And you can also combine a non-opioid like paracetamol or NSAIDs and an adjuvant drug along with the step 2 drugs. Next, please. Now, step 2 drugs are not controlled drugs. Like, for example, step 3 or opioid drugs are controlled. It's not easily available. You need a special prescription to get it. Whereas the advantage with a weak opioid is that it's more easily available. Okay, it's not controlled. And it can be, like I said, it can be combined. It can, you can even omit the step also. Sometimes the pain is very severe, you can go on to step 3. Next, please. So let's discuss one very commonly used step 2 drug, which is tramadol. This is a centrally acting drug. How does it act? It is a weak opioid agonist. Okay, opioid mu receptor agonist. So it acts like morphine, except that it has got a weaker action. It also blocks the presynaptic reuptake of 2 chemicals called serotonin and norepinephrine. So that is responsible for the descending inhibition of pain, the descending pathway which inhibits the pain. There is a pain pathway which is coming from the central nervous system down to the spinal cord, which can actually inhibit the pain impulse from going up. And that is acting through these chemicals called serotonin and norepinephrine. So this is actually increasing the level of serotonin and norepinephrine, and so activating the descending inhibition of pain. So, but another advantage of tramadol is it can be given in neuropathic pain also. Okay, and as compared to opioids, less tendency for respiratory depression and addiction. And we can commonly use a combination of tramadol and paracetamol in cancer pain. Step 1, step 2 can be combined as a tablet also, combination tablet. Next, please. So the advantage of tramadol is it's got very high oral bioavailability, which means the oral drug is well absorbed and it can be very potent. In fact, it is 1/5 as potent as morphine. That is 50 mg of tramadol. Sorry, if you give 100 mg every 4 hours, that is 400 mg of tramadol is equivalent to 40 mg of, not 40, 80 mg of morphine. Okay, so it is 1/5 as potent as morphine. IV dose is less potent as compared to the oral form. And you can also have sustained release formulation, like tramadol sustained release formulation, which you have to give it only twice daily. It's available as 50 mg or 100 mg tablets. Next, please. But it has certain side effects. Among them are nausea, vomiting, dry mouth, constipation, dizziness, sedation. So when you prescribe tramadol, please tell the patient about this. Now, tapentadol is another weak opioid. It is very similar to tramadol, but its side effects are slightly better as compared to tramadol. And it also, the method of action is also the same as tramadol. The dose is also very similar to tramadol. Okay. That also is available as tapentadol SR, twice daily doses are available. Now, codeine is a step 2 drug, but it's not available and we are not using it. And next, please. Dextropropoxifen is also not available at the moment, so I won't be talking about it. Next. So, what are the analgesic combinations that we can give? So, there are certain rules when you give these drugs. So, if in a certain category, like for example, if it's a opioid category, you don't combine a weak opioid with a strong opioid. Either you give tramadol or you give morphine, but you don't combine the two. Similarly, you don't combine a COX-1 and a COX-2 inhibitor. That means you will not combine brufen with mucoxia. Okay. But the combinations that are given are paracetamol with morphine, paracetamol with NSAIDs, or paracetamol with tramadol. Those are very good combinations that are acceptable. Next, please. Now let's discuss adjuvant drugs. Next. I've got another 5 minutes more, no? 5 to 45. Huh?
20 minutes more.
I've got 20 minutes, good.
Yes.
Up to 4 o'clock, no?
Yes.
Okay.
No, 4:30. So
no,
4:30.
I can talk up till what time?
Yes, 4 o'clock.
Now, cancer pain is not just nociceptive. It's not only because of tissue damage. Because of the cancer and its extensive spread, it can affect nerves also. So it can have a neuropathic component. Sometimes it can cause bowel obstruction. Sometimes it causes bone pain. It can also cause other symptoms like muscle spasm, etc. So it is not only tissue damage that is causing the pain and the suffering to the patient. So that is why, next please. That is why you add the adjuvant drugs to treat the other kinds of pain. Okay. So next. Now, what are adjuvant drugs? The primary action of adjuvant drug is not for pain. It is used either for convulsions or it is used for some other reason, like, for example, depression, but it also has analgesic properties. So it is given along with analgesics, so it is called a co-analgesic because they can treat the other varieties of pain that are present along with the nociceptive. Next, please. So they can be broadly classified as multi-purpose or broad analgesic efficacy or specific. Now, multi-purpose drugs are those that are given for antidepressants, corticosteroids, sedatives, etc. Okay. Whereas specific drugs are for treating specific types of pain. Like, for example, neuropathic pain, bone pain, musculoskeletal pain, bowel obstruction pain. So for that, we use certain specific adjuvant drugs. Okay. And that I will discuss in my later slides. Next, please. One important kind of pain that happens in cancer patient is the neuropathic pain. It occurs in as many as 40% of patients with cancer, along with nociceptive pain. Now, what is neuropathic pain? The current definition of neuropathic pain, according to the 2018 definition, is it is pain caused by a disease or a lesion in the somatosensory nervous system. Now, how do you say a neuropathic component is present? The patient will complain of a different quality of pain rather than sharp and localized. They will say the pain is burning in nature or shooting in nature or electric current in nature, or there can be pain on touch, or there can be abnormal sensations like feeling of cotton wool sensation or something like that. So that is when you say that it is got a dysesthetic quality or a neuropathic component. So you have to as when you assess pain, you must also see whether the pain is nociceptive or neuropathic. Next, please. So why does neuropathic pain occur? It is because, I told you, it is because of the nerves getting affected. So cancer can cause the nerves to be affected. And also, even the treatment of cancer, whether it is by chemotherapy, radiotherapy, or surgery, can induce nerve injury. And it can lead to neuropathic pain. Next, please. So earlier it was thought that opioids are not effective in neuropathic pain. Okay, they thought that opioid is only for nociceptive pain. But recently some studies have been done in which they have shown that opioids like morphine and methadone are effective in neuropathic pain. Even fentanyl can be used in the treatment of some type of neuropathic pain. And other than that, weak opioids like tramadol and tapentadol have been found to be effective in neuropathic. But besides that, there's a lot of drugs, which I will now discuss, the adjuvant drugs and co-analgesics that are useful in treating this kind of pain. Next, please. So like I said, the commonly used drugs are anticonvulsants, antidepressants, the step 2 drugs like tramadol or tapentadol, and opioids like methadone and even morphine. And the less commonly used drugs are local anesthetics, NMDA antagonists like ketamine, corticosteroids, and GABA agonists. Next, please. Now, neuropathic pain ladder is also there, like the WHO pain ladder. It is got 4 steps. The first step is you either give an antidepressant or an anticonvulsant. In step 2, you give both antidepressant and anticonvulsant. In step 3, you give a NMDA antagonist. And in step 4, you give intravenous lignocaine or a local anesthetic. Okay. Now, I told you about the anticonvulsants. Okay. Now, why do we use anticonvulsants? Because it is besides the treating convulsion, it also has analgesic properties. And the commonly used anticonvulsants are gabapentin and pregabalin. Next, please. So I won't talk about too much except for the side effects that it can cause drowsiness and sleepiness, fatigue, weight gain, and also dizziness. So when patients are on pregabalin or gabapentin, we must caution the patient about these side effects. Okay. Otherwise, it is very effective in the treatment of neuropathy and well tolerated by the patient. Next, please. Now, comparing the two, gabapentin and pregabalin is more expensive, but it is more easily administered in the sense that you can get the effective dose in 2 to 3 steps, whereas gabapentin should be slowly increased till we get the effective dose. But both are very safe and both can be used widely in the treatment of neuropathy. Next, please. Now, antidepressant. This is the other drug, first-line drug for the treatment of neuropathic pain. Now, these drugs are also used in the treatment of depression, but the doses for depression are much higher as compared to the ones that you use for treating pain. But since many patients with pain have also depression and anxiety, it is very useful in the treatment of these patients. Next, please. So how many types of antidepressants are there? One is the TCA or the tricyclic antidepressants. One is the SSRI and one is the SNRI. So I just remember the main broad headings and each one medicine in each. For example, the TCA you use tryptomer or amitriptyline. SSRI, a commonly used drug is citalopram, or an SNRI, a commonly used drug is duloxetine. Okay? Just one drug in each category. Next. Yeah, I've said this. Okay. Next, please. But the side effects of TCA also can be classified as either central nervous system, which is similar to somnolence, drowsiness, mental clouding. It can even cause suicidal tendencies. The other side effects are because of its anticholinergic effects. They include dry mouth, glaucoma, blurred vision, tachycardia, constipation, urinary retention, and even orthostatic hypotension. Next, please. So you have to avoid these antidepressants in certain patients. They are the patients with cardiac problems, who have got prostate problems, and who have got glaucoma. Avoid these drugs because they can aggravate the symptoms. Next. So amitriptyline, you start with a dose of 10 mg or 12.5 mg, and then you gradually increase it to 25 mg or even 50 mg. Anticonvulsants like gabapentin also, you start with a low dose of 100 mg, and then you can slowly every 5 days step it up. And you can even go up to 1200 mg per day. Pregabalin, you start in a dose of either 50 or 75 mg, and then gradually over a few days build it up to 300 to 450 mg. So according to the medical illness of the patient and the renal dysfunction, you need to adjust the dose of these drugs. Next, please. What are the other drugs used in neuropathic pain? Now, NMDA blockers, they are the ketamine, which is very commonly used even in anesthesia. Next, please. But the dose used to treat pain is much less as compared to the anesthetic doses. So it's called a sub-anesthetic dose. It will not cause anesthesia, but it can relieve pain. And they are like given in a dose of 10 to 25 mg orally. It can be given subcutaneously or intravenously. It can also be given as a burst ketamine, pulse course. That means you start with 100 mg and give it over 24 hours. If it is not effective, then you can step it up gradually. So that is called a burst ketamine dose. But normally you give it orally or as an infusion, IV infusion, or even subcutaneous. Next, please. But ketamine has certain side effects. The important is dysphoria. The patients get very disoriented and very agitated. Okay. Then hallucinations, nausea, vomiting. So to prevent that, you can add a benzodiazepine so that these side effects are minimized. Next, please. Local anesthetics. Local anesthetics are used, like I told you, as a step 4 of the neuropathic pain ladder. It's very useful in the pain that is not responding to all the other drugs, like antidepressants, anticonvulsants, or NMDA antagonist. But it has got a potential for toxicity, so you have to give it under observation with monitoring of the heart and the pulse and monitoring for side effects. So it has to be done in a hospital setup. Next, please. So you give Xylocard, you can give it as an IV infusion, 5 mg per kg over 1 hour. And it can be repeated the next day or the day after that. And with that, you can reduce certain types of neuropathic pain. Next, please. Now, topical lignocaine, local anesthetic, is also available as 5% patches. Now, you can even apply up to 3 patches a day. But the only caution is you have to apply it for 12 hours and then take it off for the next 12 hours because it is constantly getting absorbed. So you may land up with toxicity if it's not taken after 12 hours. Like that, you can give it for 3 successive days. There's a very low risk of side effects because of this topical lignocaine. But it's a little expensive. And it should not be used when the skin is abraded or the skin is broken. So there are some precautions that you have to follow when you're giving the topical lignocaine. Next, please. Now coming to the multi-purpose analgesic drugs. The first one is corticosteroid. It is used in a variety of cancer pains associated with neuropathic pain or bone pain or headache because of intracranial tumors because of the swelling in the brain. It can be used for joint pain, for bowel obstruction pain, and even pain due to spinal metastasis. So it is a very useful drug in the treatment of cancer. Next, please. It can cause side effects, long-term side effects, so that has to be kept in mind. Next, please. Now, the dexamethasone is the most commonly used drug. Why? Because a single drug is enough per day because it has a very action of 36 to 54 hours. So you can give just one dose, and also dexamethasone causes less of sodium and water retention. So that way it is more useful as compared to the other stimulants. The others are prednisolone and methylprednisolone. Next, please. Now, I won't go into these things, but only thing you must remember is steroids are given in the morning only. Never give it in the evening because it can cause insomnia. So all steroids are given as in the morning. And also you have to give a gastroprotective drug along with the steroid because it can cause acidity and ulcer formation. Now, GABA agonists, they are those drugs that cause, which will prevent spasticity along with pain. And they include baclofen. And it is very commonly given in pain associated with spasms. Next, please. Bone pain. Now, cancer can metastasize to the bone, and skeletal metastasis can occur from breast cancer, lung cancer, prostate cancer, multiple myeloma, colon cancer, kidney cancer, etc. So these are called skeletal related events, or SRE, and they can result in severe bone pain, which is so agonizing that it can affect the quality of life of patient. It is very, very difficult to bear bone pain. Next, please. So how do you treat it? You can start off with the simple drugs like corticosteroids and NSAIDs. Then you can give drugs like calcitonin, which can be given subcutaneously or intranasally. It will prevent, most of these drugs are preventing the bone destruction. So it is allowing bone formation. So it's called osteoblastic effect, and it will prevent osteoclastic effect. That means bone destroying is prevented. And that is how calcitonin, bisphosphonates, denosumab, and palliative radiation all are acting like that. Okay, it will prevent bone destruction and allows bone formation. Next, please. Now, bisphosphonates, the commonly used bisphosphonate is, like I said, it's given for bone pain secondary to breast cancer, prostate cancer, and multiple myeloma. It is acting by blocking the osteoclastic activity and allowing bone resorption or bone formation to occur. The one that is commonly used is zoledronic acid. It's given 4 mg IV every 4 to 8 weeks. Okay, it has got some side effects like flu-like symptoms and also renal dysfunction, hypertonia, and it can also cause osteonecrosis of the jaw. So that is quite a bad side effect. So we have to keep that in mind when we're giving these drugs. Next, please. Denosumab is also another of those drugs that are preventing the osteoclastic activity. But it is not given for prostate metastasis. Okay, it can be given for breast cancer and other meds, but not for prostate. It is more expensive, but its side effects are less as compared to your bisphosphonates. Next, please. Radiation of the bone is called palliative radiation of the bone for treating the bone pain. You have to give certain nucleotides which are selectively given to the bone, and it's very useful in metastatic prostatic cancer. Okay, next. Now, pain due to bowel obstruction. Now, steroids are very useful because it reduces the edema in the bowel and can allow the forward motion of the stool so that bowel obstruction can be relieved to a certain degree with steroids. Besides that, you can give octreotide or anticholinergic drugs like hyoscine, butyl bromide or glycopyrrolate. They decrease the secretions in the gut and it will allow the peristaltic movements to happen and prevent the peristaltic movements, and that way you can decrease the obstruction. So you can even give a combination of all, like steroid, octreotide, hyoscine, and glycopyrrolate to reduce symptoms due to bowel obstruction. Next, please. The other adjuvant drugs I'll just briefly go through are skeletal muscle relaxants. They include Myoril, tizanidine, etc. Neuroleptic agents to treat the delirium and agitation that can be present. Or you can give sedatives, anxiolytics, laxatives. They're all adjuvant drugs can be given along with the WHO analgesic ladder. Next, please. To summarize, the WHO analgesic ladder is the sheet anchor for cancer pain management. But we can also use it for non-cancer pain. The main advantage is it's simple to implement and very easily implemented throughout the world, even in the remotest area of the world. And more than anything, it has legitimized the use of opioids in cancer pain as well as in non-cancer pain. Thank you. I'm finished with this.
Thank you, madam, for the detailed presentation. So if you have any doubts, please ask.
There are a lot of people today, no? Rajalakshmi?
Yes, yes, doctor.
People and all. Some of them are from outside India also.
Yes, yes, yes.
Welcome, welcome to this course. Huh? I'm sure you'll benefit from hearing it. I hope I was clear.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Any doubts? I must tell that the nurses are a very, very, I would say, the anchor for palliative care. Okay. And so many things can be done by the nurses also, even without the doctors. Okay. So it's very important that you people know how to handle all these things so that you can monitor the side effects. You can tape, adjust the drugs also. And I mean, you play a really very important role in the palliative care team. So, no doubts, everything very clear. When people don't ask questions, it's either two things. Either everything is very clear or they have not understood anything. I hope everything is very clear.
Madam, so doctor, many chats are coming in that you are completely clear, so they don't have any doubts. So I think, ma'am, we can move on to the case presentation. Meanwhile, if you have any doubts, do chat us. We will discuss it after the case presentation. Billy Kister, can you unmute from your end and speak? Billy Kister audit, can you unmute from your end and speak? We are not able to hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Arilkista Oduk, a palliative care nurse from Kenya in Migori County Referral Hospital. Our patient today is 45-year-old. We've seen patient for a male gender with multiple myeloma. Next slide. The presenting complaints were pain from the left hip and ribs, and this pain keeps the patient awake at night. The pain is worse on movement and when weight bearing. Pain in his ribs is burning and radiates to the anterior abdominal wall. It is intermittent. He has intermittent nausea with occasional vomiting. And after being seen on a clinic day, given drugs, after 3 days, he came back again with, he has now drowsy, jacks, and reports visual hallucinations. Patient history. The patient had myeloma for 2 years now and is currently receiving treatment under the hematology team. The patient complained of pain from the left hip and ribs. The pain keeps the patient awake at night. It's worse on movements and weight bearing. The pain in his hips scores 4/5. He has tried paracetamol with little relief, and the paracetamol and the pain on his ribs score at 3.5 and worse on movement. He also has intermittent nausea associated with occasional vomiting. His bowels are opening regularly with normal stool. The patient was started on morphine during this visit, and after 3 days comes back drowsy, checks and reports having visual hallucinations. Examinations: dizziness, weakness, feeling drowsy, low HB, bone pain, and signs of dehydration. Treatment. Investigations were done. This included blood workups. Treatment was done. This includes radiations, chemotherapy, which was done this one was done in Kenyatta National Hospital, where he received vincristine, and the other one, there were around 13 sessions of chemotherapy, and was also given corticosteroids. Psychosocial aspects. This man is 45-year-old male patient with multiple myeloma, a polygamy man with 4 wives. One wife dead, the second divorced him and left him with the kids. The third elopes with a European man, leaving behind the kids. And the fourth stays with him, but according to him, doesn't give him peace of mind because she was not blessed with a child. The relationship between him and his only living brother is good and the source of hope. He's financially capable, but doesn't want further treatment, fear of leaving his children with nothing. The children are still in school, class 8, form 1, 2, and 4, college and university 3. He wanted to leave everything to the children and excluding the fourth wife. He requested the family to allow other 3 children who went with their mother for him to share his estate, but the brothers refused, and this makes him cry a lot. Medications was given paracetamol 1 gram, which was given TID. Hydration was being done normal saline as per the hydration status. He was also given liquid morphine, which was given 10 milligram 4 hourly, and dexamethasone was given 8 milligram OD. Main concern of this man was to meet his missing children and give them a share of estate, and to be pain-free and be able to sleep at night. A 45-year-old patient with severe pain and insomnia, with a complicated family and probably side effects of medication, hydration done to prevent kidney failure as a result of high calcium. Discussion points. What question would you like to ask the patient about his pain? What other information would you like to know? Which medications would you start the patient on for his symptoms? What could be the cause of these symptoms? What should your management be now? Thank you.
Thank you, sister. Anybody would like to need any more clarification regarding this patient story?
Hello, come again.
Otherwise, we can move on to the discussion points. Madam?
Yes.
Over to you.
What questions would you like to ask the patient about his pain? Now, you had mentioned Willie Kister. That was a very good presentation. Okay?
Thank you.
Good, good. But I had just some doubts about it. One is that you said the pain is 4 out of 5. Now, what scale is that? Because according to the visual analog scale, it is a score out of 10. So what is 4 out of 5? Can you just clarify that?
Come on again.
Yes.
Pardon, come on again.
Yeah.
Sister, you are not able to hear us?
Come on again. I'm not able to hear it. It's not clearly. I can't get it clearly.
You said the pain is 4 out of 5.
Yes, yes, yes.
But what scale is this? Because according to the NRS, it is out of 10.
Okay, the scale we used, we have a scale which is 1 to 5, it's a numerical scale,
Ah,
which is 1 to 5, and from 0 to 2 is then 0 is no pain, 1 to 2 and 1 to 3 is a mild pain, and 3 and 4 is a moderate pain, and 5 is severe pain. That is the scale we used.
you're using that scale. Nah? We
Yes,
use out
yes.
of 10. Nah? That is a little confusing. So according to this, the pain is
Yeah.
very severe, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
The pain is because most probably he has got metastasis in the spine.
Yeah, yeah. There's a metastasis all over the body and
Primarily in
even
this.
to the liver.
So,
So yes, and again, the bones, the blood, the platelets are affected, and he's already weak. He's on his terminal end.
okay, okay. Okay. Can we just talk about the pain? One part, you said the pain is in the ribs is shooting in nature. Can you go to that slide?
On the pain.
Okay.
Okay, okay. This man had a pain of the severe pain which was starting this man is the pain on the hips, which was mainly when he's trying to move or weight bearing, even a little lifting of something small.
Okay.
And this pain could not make this person sleep at night. Was so severe, but at first, to me it seems like we were not managing the pain properly, because when he came for this last visit, the pain was so severe, and according to me, when I was looking at according to the file and the data, the paracetamol, the grams which was being given to this man was a bit lower, because according to me, I don't know if I was right, but maybe you could have increased the paracetamol dose
Yeah.
from 1 gram, as I have learned now, from 1 gram maybe. But again, you could have also put the morphine which was now given in this visit. The morphine could have been given much earlier before he could have complained of this severe pain, according to me.
Okay. And did he also have a burning kind of pain? Somewhere I saw that burning pain. No.
Yeah, he had bone pain, and that's why it was the radiation was done at Kenyatta,
Was the
because the
pain
vertebral
burning?
bone.
Was the
Yeah, the
pain
vertebral.
burning in nature? Burning in nature. Was the pain burning in?
Yeah, the burning in nature. Yes,
So
it
I
was
would
burning in nature.
suggest, think there's a neuropathic component also. So I think you should add either a gabapentin or a pregabalin also to his treatment. Okay,
Okay, okay,
help. So, but also the side effects looks like morphine related side effects.
okay, okay.
Chronic jerks, he had drowsiness, and he had hallucination. They're all suggestive of morphine side effects. Okay,
Okay, okay.
but this 10 mg
So
very unlikely to cause morphine side effects. You know, it is very low, but the side effects look like a lot like morphine related opioid side effects. Okay, when you do the class on the next class on step 3 drugs, then you see what are the side effects of morphine, overdose. Okay, drowsiness, myoclonic hallucinations, and excessive drowsiness and all are side effects of morphine, hallucination also. So looks like this gentleman, even with a low dose, 10 mg 4 times, he's still having something like a morphine related side effects. Okay. So, I mean, I'm not sure whether we can continue morphine in this patient. Right?
yeah.
The other thing is good. You're giving paracetamol, you're giving dexamethasone, you're maintaining the hydration. But in addition to that, I feel we have to add a neuropathic drug like gabapentin or pregabalin. Okay. Huh?
We
And
we
then
can
you
add.
need, yes, and also add a sedative at night.
Yeah.
Okay, that will help.
Yes.
And of course, we have to address his psychosocial issues. That is
Yes.
causing him a lot of agitation and lot of, troubling him a lot. So we need to
Yes.
address his psychosocial issues also.
Yes.
Okay, like
Yes.
his children and his wanting to share the estate. So you need to bring a closure to all unfinished needs and unfinished wishes. Okay, so that is
Yes.
very important to address his psychosocial issues also. Anybody else wants to comment on this? So what are the discussion points? First of all, we have to ask about the pain. Is the pain burning in nature? Is there a pain on touch? Okay. And particularly in the ribs, where he has a pain, that could be very painful. Even touching the skin could be painful. So we need to add a neuropathic drug also to this treatment regime. And what other information would you like to know? One thing is we can step down the dose of morphine. See, if 10 mg Q4, see, we have to give morphine every 4 hours, not 4 times a day. According to the WHO ladder, you have to give it according to the duration of action of drug. And morphine duration is only 4 hours. So you have to give it at 6 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 10 o'clock. So there's a way of giving it. You have to give it 6 times in a day rather than 4 times a day. So we can start with a lower dose, maybe 5 mg every 4 hours. Okay, Billy Crystal, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes. 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 Thank you.
Yeah. And then what
Yes, I
medication?
can get you very clear.
And so we, like I said, we need to address that psychosocial issue is causing a lot of trauma and a lot of distress to him, which need to be addressed. And we have to take care of his sleep also. Okay, so you add a neuropathic drug,
Yes.
reduce the dose of morphine, giving it every 4 hours, keeping a watch for side effects, and also add on a sedative drug, and also try to address some of the psychosocial issues. So a counseling, a good counselor is required as part of the team that's going to visit. Any other person wants to comment? Anybody else? Any other participant has got any other ideas how to treat him?
Dr. Mary, we have a question. Any limit about amount of orphan dose per day?
There is no limit, but it has to be gradually taken up. You understand? You start with 5 mg, 5 mg every 4 hours, and then you have to increase it depending upon whether you have to give extra doses of morphine in between for breakthrough pain. So if you gradually go up, monitoring for side effects, and if there are no side effects, the end point is only control of pain. The dose is that at which the pain is controlled, provided there are no side effects. And the side effects, I mentioned earlier what the side effects are. If there are no side effects, the end point of medication is only control of pain. So to that effect, you can go higher and higher up. You can go to very high doses also. But keeping a watch for side effects, that's it. There is no upper limit.
Madam, the next question is, if the opioid is sensitive, any breakthrough dose of morphine taken?
What is it?
If opioids is sensitive, any breakthrough dose of morphine taken?
See, if the patient is sensitive and having side effects of morphine, then we should actually bring down the dose of morphine. Okay. The breakthrough is given only when the pain occurs in between the 4 hours. That is when you give, that's called a breakthrough pain. That is between 6 and 10, if the patient has pain, That's called a breakthrough pain, for which you have to give extra dose of morphine. So that is, but side effects, you have to also monitor for the side effects. Huh?
Okay, ma'am. The next question, how long would be given patient to adjust for morphine side effect?
How long? Can you repeat that question?
How long would you given patient to adjust for morphine side effect?
If the side effects are there, then immediately you should decrease the dose. You don't give time for that, okay? If the patient is showing signs of excessive drowsiness, hallucination, or myoclonic jerks, then you have to reduce the dose of morphine. You don't wait, okay? You have to come down on the dose.
But madam, but initially, when we start morphine, initially the patients has nausea, vomiting, constipation, and some sleepiness also there. So 3 to 5 days, after 3 to 5 days, that will be.
After 1 week, the nausea, vomiting will subside.
Yes.
But constipation is a persistent problem, for which you have to add a laxative also. Is a laxative being given to this patient? Billy Krister? Billy Krister, is a laxative also being given along with morphine?
Can you unmute from your end and speak, Willie Kister?
Are you giving a laxative? You said his bowels are normal, right?
Come again, please. I have an unstable network.
Giving a laxative also along with morphine.
The morphine was given at a low dose, 10 milligram, but now we don't know why he was now reacting to the morphine.
When you give morphine, you have to also write a laxative, very important. Okay. Because
Okay.
the hand that writes the morphine prescription should also write a laxative prescription along. Because
Okay.
constipation is very, very important side effect of giving opioids.
Okay.
So you have to give it. You can give a mild laxative or a strong laxative, but you have to give a laxative also.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Your vomiting usually subsides within a week's time of starting morphine.
Okay.
Some drowsiness will be there, but that you have to just keep a watch on. That's it.
Okay.
Madam, one more question. Any other medication suggestions? Hip pain and rib pain.
Yeah, this could be bone pain. You're right. It is connected to the bone because multiple myeloma normally affects the vertebral column. So it is bone pain. So in such pain, along with steroids, maybe we can start palliative radiation for him, or a drug like either bisphosphonates or denosumab. Okay. These are all the options for bone pain. It is mostly related to bone because of the weight-bearing nature. So you may have to add, along with steroids, you may have to give him a drug like bisphosphonates, denosumab, or palliative radiation to treat the bone. And even anti-inflammatory drugs are very useful, like Brufen and NSAIDs are very useful to treat bone. But if it is very severe bone pain, you may have to give bisphosphonates or palliative radiation.
One more question, ma'am.
Yeah.
Do we consider opioid rotation in this case?
You can, if the patient is not having side effects with morphine, you can change over to methadone also. Is methadone available in Kenya? I don't know. But it's available in India now, methadone. So methadone can be given instead of morphine sometimes. But when you give methadone, you have to watch out for certain side effects of methadone related to the ECG and all those things. But otherwise, it is a good drug to be given in place of morphine if the patient has side effects of morphine. Anyway, I'm very happy that there are so many questions. Huh? Very good. Any other?
No
So in
other.
this patient, it is very important for the whole team to treat the patient. Whole team is who all you have. The radiation oncologist has to be part of the team. You know, he has to give the radiation for bone pain. The medical oncologist may have to give the chemotherapy. The palliative care doctor, the nurse, the psychosocial worker, it all has to be a very, very coordinated team effort to treat this patient. Okay. The radiation oncologist is also playing a very important role in treating this patient, along with the psychosocial worker. And the morphine, like I said, it's being given a 10 mg QID. So that is not the right way of giving morphine. You have to give it Q4H, right? And you have to tell the time that you have to give it. Like you have to tell that you have to give it at 6 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 10 o'clock. And the 10 o'clock dose should be double of what you give in the daytime, so that it will tide over the whole night and you can give it the next day. So these things are very, very specific. You can't just blanket give, you know, that give it 3 times a day or 4 times a day. It all depends on the duration of action of the drug. That is why it said now that you have to give it by the clock. Paracetamol also has to be given 6 hourly in this patient.
And one more thing, ma'am, we can.
Sorry, in this patient, instead of paracetamol, you can add an NSAIDs, because he has got bone pain, and bone pain may respond more to NSAIDs as compared to paracetamol. So you can give him Brufen instead.
Ma'am, one more thing, if we can start a morphine, so we can do a morphine trial first. Usually what we do is, if a patient comes with severe pain, usually we will give a morphine trial, and based on the trial, we will start the morphine. I don't know how did you start morphine for that patient? That patient's side effect seems to be overdosage of morphine, and drowsy, as madam said, drowsy, extreme drowsiness, myoclonus, hallucination. These are the overdosage of morphine. So I think based on the morphine requirement, we can start the morphine. So if you want to increase the dose, maybe after we can after 3 days, you can, if the patient is not get adequate pain relief with that particular dosage of morphine, you can increase the dose. So otherwise, if you start the 1 point, you can start with the 10 milligram, maybe that will be in side effect. So you can start with the low dosage and you can increase the dose. Better you can do the morphine trial and see what is the amount of dose the patients need.
The next class is on step 3 drugs, so that will be given
Yes.
in detail in that class.
Yes, ma'am. And one more thing you can do this patient is you can skip the morphine 1 or 2 dosage, and then you can see the patient's condition and the patient's movement and all. So after that you can talk to the patient, and after maybe you can reduce the dose also. And here is psychological competencies, the big issue here. So that psychosocial, if the patient is having more psychosocial issues are there, that physical pain will be increasing. So that is the another part. So as the nurses, and one more thing, the madam was clearly said NSAIDs can cause renal failure. So one NSAID can cause renal failure. So as a nurses, we are the persons for looking after that problems. So we need to tell the patient about to take plenty of water, and when they take NSAID, after taking a food, they will take. That the important points we can keep in mind and instruct the patient and caregivers about that.
Yes, thank you.
So, madam, no other questions? So thank you for the excellent presentation. And so I hope all of them are clearly understand. And thank you, Sis Villikister, for the excellent presentation.
The PPT will be shared with all the participants, no?
Sure, sure, ma'am.
So then all of you can go through the PPT once again, so it will become clear, right?
Yes, yes, ma'am. Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. So we can see you next Monday with the continuation of management of pain on opioids. So thank you all for joining in and making it an interactive session. Let the rhythm go on like that. We will see you next Monday. Bye.